The bathroom floor was wet and cold. Dark red water slowly moved toward the drain. Travis Alexander lay still in the small room, his eyes open, staring at nothing. The house was silent. No music. No voices. No footsteps. Just the soft hum of the air conditioner and the slow drip of water from the shower head. It looked peaceful. But it was not. This was the moment everything ended. This was the moment that would take 20 years to fully understand. Outside the bathroom door, the house stood calm, like nothing was wrong. Neighbors watered their lawns. Cars passed on the street. Birds sang in the trees. No one knew what had just happened inside. And no one could imagine the dark story that led to this moment. How did a smiling, friendly young man end up alone on a bathroom floor? Who was with him in his final moments? And why did it take so long to uncover the full truth? The answers were hidden in secrets, lies, fear, and a dangerous kind of love. And the story began long before that quiet night. Travis Alexander was known as a kind and happy man. He lived in Mesa, Arizona. He worked hard. He loved to travel. He believed in helping others. His friends said he always tried to see the good in people. He liked to talk. He liked to laugh. He liked to dream about the future. He had big plans. Every morning, Travis woke up early. He worked on his goals. He stayed positive, even when life felt hard. He believed that if he stayed kind and honest, good things would come. Most days were simple. Work, friends, family, church, gym, a normal life. Until he met Jodi Arias. At first, she seemed friendly. She was quiet but curious. She listened closely when Travis spoke. She asked many questions. She wanted to know everything about him. He thought she was interesting. They talked for hours. They shared stories. They laughed. They messaged late into the night. Soon, their friendship became something more. At first, it felt exciting. But slowly, small strange moments began to appear. Jodi became very attached. She wanted to know where Travis was at all times. She asked who he talked to. She became upset when he spent time with friends. Travis tried to calm her. He believed problems could be fixed with patience and kindness. But the tension grew. Their relationship became confusing. Some days were happy. Other days were filled with fear and anger. Travis felt trapped between caring for her and protecting himself. He tried to pull away. But Jodi did not let go. Even when they stopped being together, she stayed close. She sent messages. She made phone calls. She traveled long distances just to see him. Travis told friends he felt uneasy. He said something did not feel right. But he never imagined how dangerous things would become. Weeks passed. Then months. Life seemed to return to normal. Travis focused on work. He planned a trip with friends. He talked about his future. He smiled again. But behind the scenes, someone was watching. Someone was planning. On the day everything ended, the sun rose like any other morning. Travis woke up, showered, and prepared for the day. He had plans. He had places to go. He had people to meet. He did not know that this would be his final day. Hours later, neighbors would remember how quiet the house had been. Too quiet. No sounds. No movement. Just silence. Friends tried calling him. No answer. They sent messages. No reply. At first, they thought he was busy. But then worry began to grow. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. When friends finally entered his home, they walked slowly, calling his name. No answer. They moved through the rooms, fear rising with every step. Then they reached the bathroom. And everything changed. What they saw would stay with them forever. Police arrived soon after. The house was sealed. Investigators moved carefully, looking for clues. They searched for signs of struggle. They searched for fingerprints. They searched for answers. But the truth was hidden behind lies and broken memories. Early evidence pointed in one direction. But nothing was clear. Every detail raised more questions. Why was there no sign of forced entry? Why did the scene look both violent and calm? Why did so many details seem carefully placed? The investigation would stretch for years. Every new clue would bring hope. Every dead end would bring frustration. And every discovery would reveal a deeper and darker story. But on that first day, all anyone knew was this. Travis Alexander was gone, and the person responsible had vanished. The case became one of the most confusing and painful mysteries in modern crime history. Friends cried. Family mourned. The world began to watch. And somewhere, someone knew the truth. Someone who had been there. Someone who had seen it all. But they were not talking. Not yet. And just as detectives uncovered a shocking piece of evidence that pointed to a familiar face, a new discovery would turn the entire case upside down, changing everything they thought they knew. The real nightmare was only beginning. The house on Kingman Street stayed quiet long after the police left. Yellow tape blocked the front door. Patrol cars came and went. Neighbors whispered. Reporters gathered outside, trying to understand what had happened inside that calm-looking home. Inside the police station, detectives stared at photos, reports, and notes. They replayed every detail again and again. One name kept returning: Jodi Arias. At first, police were not sure what to think. She had once been close to Travis. They had dated. They had shared time together. But she lived far away now, in California. Could she really be connected to his death? Detectives decided to call her. When Jodi answered, her voice sounded calm. She said she had not seen Travis in months. She said she was shocked and sad. She said she had no idea who could have done such a terrible thing. Her story sounded simple. Too simple. Police checked phone records. They checked emails. They checked travel records. And slowly, cracks began to appear. They discovered that Jodi had rented a car just days before Travis died. They found that she had driven hundreds of miles. They found gas receipts showing a long road trip that ended in Arizona. She had been closer than she admitted. When detectives asked her again, her story changed. She said she had visited Travis briefly. Then she said two strangers broke into the house. Then she said she ran away in fear. Each time she spoke, the details shifted. Every new version raised more questions. Police began to focus on her closely. They searched her home. They searched her car. They searched her belongings. Then they found the camera. Inside it were photos taken just hours before Travis died. Photos of Travis smiling. Photos of him relaxed. Photos of him alive. And then, suddenly, photos showing fear. Photos showing panic. Photos showing a struggle. The timestamps told a clear story. Jodi had been there. The truth could no longer hide. When confronted, Jodi denied everything. She said she remembered nothing. She said she had blacked out. She said strange things had happened. But the evidence was strong. More evidence came forward. Blood evidence. Fingerprints. Witness statements. Every piece pointed in the same direction. The case slowly came together. But the full story took years to understand. The trial became one of the most watched in American history. People followed every update, every photo, every detail. In court, the story of Travis's final day unfolded. The calm moments, the sudden danger, the fear, the struggle, the silence. Family members cried. Friends shook their heads in disbelief. The world watched, trying to understand how a relationship filled with emotion had ended in such tragedy. In the end, the jury reached a decision. Justice moved forward. But no decision could bring Travis back. His life ended far too soon. His dreams were never completed. His future was taken away. Yet his story changed lives. It warned others about danger signs. It showed how obsession can become destruction. It reminded people to listen when fear speaks. And it proved that even when truth hides for many years, it always finds a way to come out. But for those who loved Travis, the pain never fully faded. Because some mysteries, even when solved, still leave empty spaces that can never be filled. And the quiet house on Kingman Street would forever hold the memory of a life lost and a lesson the world would never forget. The trial did not end the story. Even after the verdict, people still asked the same question. How could something so terrible happen in such a normal place? News channels kept showing the house on Kingman Street. Reporters stood outside. Cameras zoomed in on the front door, the windows, the driveway. It looked like any other home in America. But inside, a life had ended, and nothing could change that. Travis's family tried to return to normal life, but it was not easy. Every day, they woke up thinking about him. His smile, his voice, his dreams. They remembered how he always helped others, how he stayed positive, how he believed in hard work and kindness. Now, he was gone. His parents struggled with grief. His siblings tried to stay strong, but the pain followed them everywhere. Simple things like eating dinner, watching TV, or driving past familiar places brought back memories. At night, the house felt too quiet. Meanwhile, Jodi's story continued to confuse people. Even after being found guilty, she still changed her explanation. One day she claimed she acted in fear. Another day she said she could not remember. Then she said she was protecting herself. But the evidence never changed. The photos, the records, the timeline. Everything showed what had truly happened. Experts studied the case. Psychologists tried to explain the behavior. They talked about obsession, control, jealousy, and fear of losing someone. They explained how emotions, when left unchecked, can turn dangerous. The case became a lesson taught in schools and training programs. It showed warning signs. It taught people to watch for red flags. It reminded everyone that danger does not always look scary at first. Sometimes, it looks friendly. Sometimes, it looks loving. Sometimes, it looks normal. But deep inside, something dark can be growing. Years passed. The media slowly moved on. New cases took the spotlight. But for those who remembered, the story never faded. True crime shows replayed the events. Podcasts retold the timeline. Documentaries analyzed every detail. Each time, people felt the same shock. Each time, they asked the same question: how did no one stop this? Some of Travis's friends started programs to teach about healthy relationships. They visited schools and community centers. They shared his story so others might stay safe. They spoke about trust. They spoke about boundaries. They spoke about listening to instincts. They believed that if even one person avoided danger because of Travis's story, his life would still make a difference. The house on Kingman Street was eventually sold. New families moved in. They painted the walls. They changed the floors. They filled the rooms with new memories. But for many people, that house would always carry the shadow of what happened. It became a symbol, a reminder, a warning. Late at night, when the street was quiet and the lights were low, some neighbors still remembered the sirens, the police lights, and the shocked faces. They remembered the day everything changed. And far away, in a silent cell, Jody lived with the choices she had made. Days passed slowly. Hours felt like years. Every morning looked the same. Every night ended the same. There were no cameras, no interviews, no spotlight, only silence and time. Time to think, time to remember, time to face the truth. But for Travis, time had stopped forever. His story ended, but its impact did not. And that is why people still speak his name. That is why his story is still told. Because remembering keeps the lesson alive. And forgetting would mean losing the chance to protect others from the same fate. Years after the trial, the story of Travis Alexander still followed many people like a shadow. It was not just a crime story anymore. It had become a warning. In schools, teachers used the case to talk about healthy relationships. In training centers, police officers studied it to understand how emotional crimes can grow slowly and quietly. In homes across America, families watched documentaries about the case and talked about trust, danger, and warning signs. Travis's friends kept his memory alive. They started small programs to teach young people about emotional safety. They spoke about how love should never hurt, control, or scare someone. They explained that jealousy, when it grows too strong, can become dangerous. They reminded people to speak up when something feels wrong. One of Travis's closest friends, Ryan, traveled across the country. He stood in front of classrooms, churches, and community halls. He told Travis's story in simple words so everyone could understand. He described Travis as kind, hopeful, and full of dreams. He talked about how small problems turned into big danger. And he always ended with the same message: pay attention to the signs. Some listeners cried. Some sat in silence. Some later said his words helped them leave unsafe relationships. Each time that happened, Ryan felt like Travis was still helping people. Back in Arizona, the house on Kingman Street had fully changed. New families lived there. Children played in the yard. Dogs barked behind the fence. Life moved on. But sometimes, late at night, neighbors still felt uneasy. Not because of ghosts or fear, but because of memory. They remembered the police lights flashing. They remembered the hushed voices. They remembered how normal the house looked, even as something terrible had happened inside. It reminded them that danger can hide in quiet places. Meanwhile, inside prison walls, Jody's life was silent and slow. Days blended together. Mornings began early. Lights turned on. Doors opened and closed. Meals were served on strict schedules. There was no freedom, no privacy, no escape from thoughts. Time moved differently there. Each hour felt heavy. Each night felt long. She spent many hours alone, thinking, remembering, and reliving the past. Sometimes she tried to block it out. Sometimes the memories came rushing back, clear and painful. The photos, the messages, the final moments. They never fully disappeared. Psychologists who studied her case continued to debate what caused such extreme actions. Some pointed to obsession. Some pointed to fear of loss. Others talked about emotional control and unhealthy attachment. But no explanation could change what had happened. Outside, life continued. New stories filled the news. New crimes shocked the world. But Travis's story stayed special. It stayed powerful. Because it showed how fast love can turn into danger when emotions grow out of control. Years later, a young couple watched a documentary about the case. After it ended, they sat quietly for a long time. Then the girl spoke. She said she had been afraid in her relationship but did not know if her fears were real. That night, she decided to talk to someone she trusted. That conversation changed her life. And stories like that happened again and again. Travis's story became a silent protector, guiding people away from harm. His life, though cut short, continued to save others. In the end, the case was no longer only about a crime. It was about lessons. It was about awareness. It was about listening to warning signs. And most of all, it was about remembering that every choice, every action, every moment of anger or jealousy carries weight. Because once a line is crossed, it can never be erased. And some moments change everything forever. The story of Travis Alexander continued to travel far beyond Arizona. True crime shows, podcasts, and documentaries kept sharing his case. Each retelling reached new people. And each time, the same questions returned. How did it happen? Could it have been stopped? Were there warning signs that were missed? Police officers and detectives studied the case in training rooms. They looked closely at the timeline. They examined the phone records. They reviewed the photos and the digital trail. They talked about how modern technology helped solve the crime. One detective explained how, years ago, a case like this could have stayed a mystery. But now, every text, every call, every email leaves a trace. And in this case, those traces told a clear story. Still, solving the crime did not bring peace to everyone. Travis's parents carried a deep sadness that never faded. They loved their son deeply. They remembered his laughter, his kindness, and his hope for the future. Holidays were the hardest. His empty chair at the table reminded them of everything that was lost. Sometimes they visited his grave. They brought flowers. They sat quietly. They spoke to him as if he could hear them. They told him about the world, about changes, about family news. It helped them feel close to him, even though he was gone. His younger siblings grew up carrying his memory. They remembered how he used to help them with homework, how he made jokes, and how he always believed in them. His life became a guide for their choices. They promised to live in a way that would make him proud. Meanwhile, across the country, other families began to recognize warning signs in their own lives. Some saw patterns of jealousy. Some noticed controlling behavior. Some realized they were scared but did not know why. Travis's story gave them courage to speak up. Support groups formed. Counselors shared his story in lessons about emotional safety. Young people learned that love should never feel like fear. Slowly, change began. Each small action added up. And though nothing could bring Travis back, his life continued to shape the world in quiet ways. Years passed, and the case became part of American crime history. It stood as one of the most studied emotional crime cases in the country. New investigators joined police departments. They learned about Travis's case as part of their training. They studied how careful evidence work and patient investigation led to justice. They learned how emotions, when left unchecked, could become dangerous. They learned how silence could allow harm to grow. And they learned that early action could save lives. One young detective, inspired by the case, focused his career on crimes driven by emotional control. He worked closely with social workers, therapists, and schools. His goal was simple: stop tragedies before they happen. In many cases, he succeeded. At the same time, new technology continued to change investigations. Digital footprints became stronger. Cameras became smaller. Tracking became more accurate. Criminals found it harder to hide. But even with better tools, one truth remained: prevention was better than solving crimes after they happened. Families, schools, and communities all had a role to play. That lesson became one of the greatest outcomes of the case. Not just justice, but understanding. And through that understanding, protection. Inside prison, time felt endless. Days followed strict routines. Meals came at fixed hours. Lights turned off at set times. Silence filled the long corridors. Every year, the outside world changed. New buildings rose. New technologies appeared. New generations grew up. But behind the walls, everything stayed the same. Reflection became unavoidable. Memories returned often. Some days brought regret. Some days brought anger. Some days brought emptiness. And on those days, the full weight of past choices felt unbearable. Psychologists continued to study emotional crimes like this one. They worked to understand how obsession, fear, and control could grow into something deadly. They searched for ways to help people before they reached that breaking point. Programs were built. Hotlines were created. Counseling became easier to access. Slowly, awareness spread. Each life saved became a silent victory. Each prevented tragedy became a tribute to those already lost. In the end, Travis Alexander's story became more than a crime case. It became a message, a warning, a lesson. His life reminded people that love should never hurt. That fear is a sign to step back. That control is not care. And that silence can be dangerous. Communities grew stronger because of what they learned. Families spoke more openly. Friends looked out for one another. And many people found the courage to leave unsafe situations. Travis's kindness, his dreams, and his hopeful spirit lived on through those changes. Though his life ended too soon, his impact stretched far beyond his years. And in that way, his story never truly ended. It continued. In every person who chose safety. In every voice that spoke up. And in every heart that learned to protect itself before it was too late. As the years moved forward, the story of Travis Alexander reached new generations. Teenagers who were not even born when the crime happened now learned about it in school programs, online videos, and safety lessons. Teachers used the case to talk about emotional safety, healthy relationships, and warning signs. They explained how control, jealousy, and fear can slowly grow without people noticing. They taught students that respect and kindness are the real signs of love. Many young people listened carefully. Some saw pieces of their own lives in the story. They thought about their friendships, their relationships, and their family situations. For the first time, they understood that feeling scared or trapped was not normal. Counselors reported more students coming forward to ask for help. Parents noticed changes too. They became more open with their children. They talked more. They listened more. They tried to understand what their kids were feeling instead of just telling them what to do. Small changes began to spread through communities. In Arizona, local groups held events in Travis's memory. They invited speakers who taught about emotional health. They shared real-life stories. They offered free counseling sessions for people who needed support. Every year, more people attended. Each gathering reminded everyone that one life lost could still protect many others. Technology continued to improve, and with it, the way crimes were solved. New tools allowed investigators to trace digital trails even faster. Phone data, location tracking, and camera systems became more advanced. This made it harder for criminals to hide their actions. But police officers also learned that technology alone was not enough. Human awareness mattered just as much. They trained officers to recognize emotional danger signs during regular calls. If neighbors reported loud arguments, repeated disturbances, or signs of fear, officers paid closer attention. Social workers began working closely with police departments. Together, they created systems that could step in early before small problems became deadly ones. Many lives were saved through early intervention. Behind every rescue was the memory of cases like Travis's. His story became a guide for better action. In quiet moments, people still thought about Travis himself. They remembered his smile. They remembered his kindness. They remembered how he always tried to help others. Friends who once shared laughter with him now shared stories with their children. They wanted the next generation to know who he was, not just how he died. They spoke of his dreams, his plans, and his hope. They described his love for adventure, his belief in hard work, and his strong faith in people. Through these stories, Travis lived on, not as a victim, but as a young man who mattered. His life became a reminder that every person leaves a mark on the world, whether they realize it or not. In the end, the case stood as a powerful lesson for the entire nation. It showed how small warning signs could grow into terrible outcomes if ignored. It showed how important it is to speak up, even when it feels hard. It showed that listening can save lives. And it showed that understanding emotions is just as important as understanding laws. Though the crime could never be undone, its impact shaped a safer future. Travis Alexander's story became a light in dark places, a voice for the silent, a warning for the unaware, and a guide for those searching for safety. His journey ended, but his message continued. carried forward by every person who chose courage, care, and compassion over fear. And in that way, his story would never truly fade. Years later, investigators across the country still studied the case in training rooms. New officers sat in quiet classrooms, watching old footage, reading reports, and listening to instructors explain every detail. They learned how small emotional clues, ignored at first, had grown into deadly danger. The lessons were clear. Never dismiss fear. Never ignore warning signs. Never assume a situation is harmless just because there are no visible injuries. They were taught to look deeper. They were trained to notice patterns, repeated phone calls, emotional distress, controlling behavior, isolation, and threats that seemed small but were not. These lessons changed how police handled many calls. In homes across America, officers now took extra time. They listened more. They asked more questions. They checked for emotional safety, not just physical danger. Many people were protected because of these changes. In quiet ways, Travis's story was still saving lives. Meanwhile, families affected by similar tragedies began to connect. Support groups formed in different states. People who had lost loved ones to emotional violence shared their pain, their regrets, and their hopes. They cried together. They healed together. They reminded each other that grief did not mean weakness. Some of them started speaking publicly. They visited schools, churches, and community centers. They told their stories honestly, even when it hurt. Their goal was simple: to prevent another tragedy. They taught people how to recognize emotional abuse. They explained that fear, control, and isolation are not signs of love. They encouraged people to reach out early. Little by little, their voices grew stronger. Communities became more aware, and awareness became protection. Late one evening, in a quiet Arizona neighborhood, a teenage girl sat alone in her room, watching a documentary about Travis Alexander. She had never heard his name before. But as she listened, something inside her shifted. She recognized the fear. She recognized the control. She recognized the silence. For months, she had felt trapped in a relationship that made her afraid. She had told herself it was normal. She had hoped it would get better. Now she knew it would not. With shaking hands, she picked up her phone and sent a message to a trusted teacher. That single message changed her life. Help arrived. Safety returned. And another tragedy was stopped before it could begin. In that quiet moment, the true power of Travis's story revealed itself once more. His life, though taken too soon, continued to protect others. And as long as people kept listening, learning, and speaking up, his legacy would remain strong, guiding, warning, and saving lives in ways no one could ever fully measure.